Good morning, everybody. Another rainy morning in the Amazon rainforest as the rainy season is starting. Um, so we're gonna have a few months of fairly rainy weeks. Then the sun comes out from time to time, so it's pretty cool. It's not like it is on the coast where sometimes it's sunny for a few months and then it's just cloudy for a few months straight, and some people don't like that because they get depressed. Unfortunately, we don't really have that issue here. Um, However, there are some nuisances, like after a few days of heavy rain, the ground just really gets saturated with water, and it takes a few days to dry out, so things can get a little bit muddy. But that's not the worst thing. Kind of get used to it. And some people often ask about different building methods and what do we usually build here? Why do we usually do post and beam construction wood houses, things like that? Do other construction methods work? Um, Yeah, so typically what we do here, partly because it's the cheapest and the easiest and things like that, is post and beam style raised wood houses. I don't have an example of one right here, but basically you're going to have cement bases in the ground, and then wood posts on top of that, raising or raise the cement posts to raise the house, and your wooden floor has got to be at least 50 centimeters off the ground, ideally. If it's only 50 centimeters, I would still put a vapor barrier on the ground. Some people raise it up even higher, like 1.5, 2.5 meters to have a usable space, like a first floor underneath with maybe a cement floor. The point is the wood floor is generally going to be off the ground. The living space of the house is generally going to be higher up, which means a little bit less humidity. Not that it's that humid here, but it's definitely less humid here than it was in Connecticut in the summer, where I grew up. So yeah, being kind of high up is nice, less chance of spiders and snakes getting in the house. And it just so happens that for a raised living area, a wooden post and beam construction house is the most economical. But of course, other methods do work here. So the three most common earthen building methods, aside from I guess sticks and cow manure and mud, are you have rammed earth, you have earth bag, and you have cob, right? Which you can do all of those things in this climate. The main thing is you can't do domes. You can't do earth bag domes or domes of any kind. I would not recommend. Due to the rainfall is going to eventually erode away the dome surface. You're going to have to keep retreating it over and over again, and that's just not very economical. So you can do earth bag house, but you can do earth bag house with a traditional roof. You can't do an earth bag dome. You just have to pay special attention to the foundation. Maybe in a super dry climate like in Mexico, for example, you might be able to get away with just putting a gravel bed on the ground and just putting your earth bags right on top of that. But here I would recommend a cement footing wall with a vapor barrier and drainage underneath it, and then putting your earth bags on top of that. The same thing with rammed earth and cob. I would do the same thing, and then make sure you have a nice wide roof with gutters and a French drain dug around the house, and that way you'll be golden. In fact, pretty much all the houses in this area were earthen houses up until about 50, 60 years ago. The people who had lots of money would build wood houses, but everyone else just had earthen houses with thatch roofs. People with a lot of money would get wood houses with clay tile roofs. And the earthen style was usually either clay bricks or pressed clay bricks or a stick frame with cow manure and mud slapped up against it, and those actually work fine in this climate. It's just you need a wider roof and you need to do a bit more maintenance to keep it dry and good. So of the three, of the rammed earth, cob, and earth bag, the one I would recommend most for this climate is rammed earth, because it's so compressed it will keep moisture out. You're much less likely to have moisture problems. But just in general, I think it's the better of the three because it lasts a hell of a lot longer. It can last 1,000 years in an ideal climate, and it's just really strong. So there are lots of other building methods, but okay, so there's like earth ships where you basically just take a bunch of random crap and throw it together. Those usually cost more money and take a lot more labor than people guess. And here in Ecuador, in the third world, those things aren't always as free as we might think. Like in the United States, you can get tires easily for free, because who would sell used tires, right? Who would buy them? But here, actually, used tires are a bit more in demand because people are poor, so they want to be able to buy really cheap materials for retaining walls and stuff like that. So if you really want enough tires to build a house, you might actually have to start paying like $5 per tire. You certainly can get free tires, but it's more difficult to find them. And the other thing about these earthen constructions, people assume they're really cheap. Oh, I could build an earthback house because we can be way cheaper than a wooden house. And generally, it's all going to cost the same. It's not going to be one significantly more, significantly less. You're not going to save a whole ton of money by doing an earthen house instead of a wood house, or a metal house instead of this house. Concrete and brick houses are definitely going to cost more than wood houses in general, but you're replacing less materials with more labor, or less labor with more materials, or there's some kind of trade-off going on there. There's my raised wood cabin that I'm going to hopefully start constructing within the next couple of months. Yeah, so and the main issue you're dealing with here in this climate is the damp rising. So in like monsoon climates, which this isn't, you get a couple months of just non-stop pouring rain, and then the rest of the year it's bone dry. So you can build earthen domes and thatch roofs because that 2 months of rain isn't enough to really do anything. But here, you know, we get maybe like 7 months of drier-ish and 5 months of wetter-ish. But the rainfall is more evenly distributed throughout the year, so you don't really get a break in terms of the structure being able to stay dry for 8 months or 10 months straight. Like in South Florida, you would get 8 months of it being almost totally dry, and then a few months of some more pouring rain. The ground is more uniformly damp throughout the year, and you have to think about that more. With cement buildings here, buildings with cement foundations like cement floors, damp rising can be an issue. It's not as much of an issue as it would be in cold climates. See, the reason here it's an issue is because contractors generally don't use proper drainage or vapor barriers. Of course, when I'm doing a cement house, I usually always tell the contractors to use a vapor barrier and drainage and things like that. But the reason they get away with not doing it here is because here the houses aren't sealed like they are in northern climates, because you don't have to heat or cool the houses. So there's not so much of like a black mold issue. People aren't getting lung disease from living in houses like this. All that happens is you got what is it called? Phosphorescence, like this white mineral that shows up on the base of the wall of the house on the inside and kind of comes through the paint, so it just looks a little bit ugly. And every once in a while you scrape it off and paint over it. So that happens. But in general, you don't get actual like houses getting full with black mold and getting destroyed. Because like I said, they're breathable houses, they're open. Even like wealthy people in the area, a lot of them don't even bother to have screens put on their windows. They just have glass windows that are open most of the time, because there's not so much issue with the bugs. So it just doesn't become a problem because the houses are open. But still, even with it not becoming a problem, most people don't like that issue with the damp rising and the paint coming off the lower walls of a cement house. So the same issues you're running into with an earthen house, you don't want it to be sucking up moisture from the ground. So that's why a good vapor barrier and a foundation is important. And two more building methods I kind of forgot to touch on are geodesic domes and Quonset huts. Two kind of interesting things. Geodesic domes, my personal preference is to avoid them just because it's hard to get the gutter overhang issue in this climate. But that also applies to Quonset huts. So my real main issue with geodesic domes is you're generally using some kind of synthetic plastic material like PVC for the sheathing in the walls, and I prefer not to live in that. That being said, it can be an economical way to build a house, but as I said, all these things you read on the internet that are all super cheap and easy and really fast, they're actually not. So you're not going to spend much less on a geodesic dome than you would on any of the other traditional styles. As for a Quonset hut, I've looked into that quite a bit. Basically, you're buying corrugated steel sheets that are galvanized in either pure zinc or a zinc aluminum alloy, which is known as Galvalume. Of course, I would prefer the pure zinc. 2 millimeter thick or 3 millimeter thick sheets, and you're just making this big curve, a semicircle like that, kind of like a tunnel, but you don't make it long enough to be a tunnel, make it more square, because otherwise you get the tunnel effect inside the building unless you want a tunnel. But you may have seen those in the United States. They're called Quonset huts. They use them to build warehouses, military storage depots, aircraft hangars, and even houses and workshops and all kinds of things. And there's some really nice, beautiful houses made with the Quonset hut style. So basically you're just going to run your long cement footings along the ground. You're going to buy this material, you're going to assemble it all together, and it's kind of cool. The wall and the structure and the frame and the roof and the sheathing, it's all one. You literally just assemble it, just bolt it all together, and that's it. So it's really simple. It's really great. You can put a raised floor inside it, and it's a really interesting. And I hope to experiment with that in the future. Here, I hope to build some Quonset hut buildings and see how they turn out. Hope this video helped some of you plan your houses in wet, humid, tropical climates. Have a great day.